morning, dear students. Today we are going to start a new section that is genetic control of development and embryonic axis formation in Drosophila. And actually, this area is somewhat broad. Anyhow, we will go through all the stages in small videos. So today we are going to start with the primary axis formation during oogenesis. The process of embryogenesis, that process actually begin at the time of fertilization, just after the fertilization. But the molecular events that is critical for the Drosophila embryogenesis, that is actually started during the oogenesis itself, during the process of development of oocyte itself, from the oogonium. When that oocyte start to develop, during that process itself, molecular events critical for Drosophila's embryogenesis is starting. Okay. Each oocyte is descended from a single female germ cell called the oogonium, and that oogonium is surrounded by an epithelium of follicle cell. That oogonium is surrounded by so many follicle cells. Okay. And before oogenesis begins, that means before the process that lead to the development of oocyte, this oogonium divides 4 times. How many times it is dividing? It is dividing 4 times. How it divides? Through incomplete cytokinesis. We need to note that. Incomplete cytokinesis means the nucleus only is dividing completely and the cytoplasm is not dividing. And what results because of that? It gives rise 16 interconnected cells. 16 cells are forming because of this 4 rounds of division of oogonium. And these 16 cells exist in interconnected form through its cytoplasm. And among the 16 cells, 15 are nerve cells and only one is a single oocyte precursor. And where it is positioned, that single oocyte precursor, it is usually positioned at the future posterior end of the follicle. I already drawn you that there is some cells that surrounds that oogonium, and that cells are called follicle cells, and that inside that oogonium is undergoing repeated rounds of division, and that results in the formation of 16 interconnected cells that includes 15 nerve cells and a single precursor, as a single oocyte precursor. And that oocyte precursor is positioned to the future posterior end of the follicle. Suppose this is the posterior end of the follicle. So in that way it will position like. So is an image of that 16 cells which are all connected each other through its cytoplasm. That means whatever present in the cell can come here and finally reach to this oocyte precursor. Okay. As oocyte precursor develop, this one is the oocyte precursor. Numerous mRNAs made in the nerve cells that we will see in the coming slides. So many mRNAs are forming inside these nerve cells, and it is transported through the microtubules. Microtubules, we know it's a cytoskeleton inside cell, and it acts as a path or a tract for the transportation of this mRNA. And to where it is transporting? It is transporting to the enlarging oocyte. So from here, all the mRNAs, whatever mRNAs are forming here, all can transported ultimately finally to this growing, enlarging oocyte. So that's what I am just showing. All these mRNAs are moving through the cytoplasmic connection to the oocyte precursor. It is enlarging. Okay. And the follicular cell, here we can see the follicular cells, and these are all the nerve cell, and this is the oocyte precursor. Okay. The follicular epithelial cell surrounding the developing oocyte is initially uniform. Oh, not that feature. It is initially uniform with respect to what? With respect to its fate. It can be grow to any other type of cell. Its fate is uniform. All the cells' fate is uniform. But this uniformity is broken. How it is broken? By two signals. From where that signal is coming, it is organized by the oocyte nucleus itself. The oocyte nucleus set out two signals, and because of those signals, the uniform fate of all the follicular cells is disturbed. That uniformity is broken. Okay. So, both these signals, I already told you that two signals are coming from the oocyte, and both these signals are produced by a same gene. What's the name of that gene? It's very interesting to hear that names. Name is Gurkhan. Gurkhan. And this Gurkhan message means from that gene that mRNA is forming, and that mRNA is actually synthesizing in nerve cells. In the nerve cells. Uh, and after it gets synthesized here, it is transporting to the oocyte nucleus. After it gets synthesized here from Gurkhan gene, it is transporting to the oocyte nucleus. Okay, clear? Then, after it reaches the oocyte, where it is localizing, it is localized between the nucleus of the oocyte and its cell membrane. And that means inside the cytoplasm. Okay. And it get translated to the Gurkhan protein. Clear? So what's that? As the oocyte precursor form here, from the nerve cells or whatever mRNA is forming, it can transport it to the oocyte precursor. Here we are mentioning about the Gurkhan genes mRNA product, and that mRNA is transporting to the oocyte precursor, and on reaching the oocyte, it remains between the nucleus and cell membrane, and it undergoes its translation to form Gurkhan protein. So we know that beyond its outer side is covered by follicular cells. Okay. At this time, the oocyte nucleus is very near the posterior tip of the follicle, and the Gurkhan signal is, this is the signal, Gurkhan signal means Gurkhan protein is received by this follicle cells at that position through a receptor. We need to note that receptor encoding gene, encoded by which gene? Torpedo gene. Okay. So that's what I am going to show. That oocyte is located near to the posterior follicle cell, and inside this oocyte cell, that Gurkhan protein is forming and is setting out that signal, and that signal is received by a receptor, and that receptor is encoded by the gene. Which gene? Torpedo gene. So that's what showing that Gurkhan protein is bound by that receptor that is encoded by the torpedo gene. As the follicle cells in the posterior end, follicle cells in the posterior end receive that Gurkhan protein with the help of a receptor that is encoded by the torpedo gene. This follicle cell send a signal back to the oocyte, and that signal, what it do? It results in the reorganization of what? Reorganization of cytoskeleton that is present in the oocyte. Reorganize in what fashion it is reorganizing? It reorganizes in such a fashion that all the microtubules are arranged with its minus end towards the anterior end and the plus end, minus end towards the anterior and the plus end towards the posterior end of the oocyte. In that way, all the microtubules are arranged. How that reorganization happened? Because of a back signal from the follicles that present in the future posterior end. Okay, that's what I'm going to show you. This is the that stage, that cytoskeletal element, that microtubules, they are reorganized in such a fashion that minus end pointed towards the anterior end of the oocyte and plus end pointed towards the posterior end of the oocyte. Okay, and that cytoskeletal rearrangement has some purpose. What is the purpose? What is the use of that? So we already have learned that from the nerve cells, all the mRNAs, whatever mRNAs is forming, as there exists intercellular cytoplasmic connection, all these mRNAs can move, transport to the oocyte. So, as this cytoskeletal elements arranged in this form like some bridges, these components, cytoplasmic components from the nerve cells, can easily transported to the oocyte precursor. Okay, and what would be the component contents of that cytoplasmic thing that coming from nerve cells to the oocyte? It includes some maternal messengers like bicoid and nanos mRNA. So, those components that is coming out from the nerve cells to the oocyte through the microtubules mainly include two mRNAs. Which are those mRNA? Bicoid and nanos mRNA. And that bicoid mRNA, it is transporting through the cytoskeleton, it is transporting towards the anterior end, and the nanos is transporting towards the posterior end of the oocyte. So, wherever that bicoid mRNA protein is moving, that end become the anterior end, the other end become the posterior end. So, that's what written here. Bicoid proteins are transported towards the anterior end of the oocyte, and nanos mRNA is protein encoder from nanos mRNA is transporting towards the posterior end of the oocyte. So in that sense, the protein products encoded by bicode and nanos, this is not a D, nanos, they are critical for establishing the anterior and posterior polarity of the embryo. And one more thing, I already told you that this bicode and nanos is transporting to the cytoskeleton. Who is carrying these proteins to this cytoskeleton? It is none other than the motor proteins of the microtubules. It is transporting these two proteins in these both directions. So in this way, the anterior and posterior polarity is means it is created in the oocyte. I hope the entire content, entire topic is very much clear to you. With this, I am going to wind up today's section. Thank you. I'm an icon, man. I'm a girl about a 10. I should fuck her in a Benz.